up, OKC community? Man, love this place. If you don't know us, my name is Ryan, and this is my lovely wife, Ariel. And we serve as the Alpha Directors here at OKC Community, among other things, like janitor and stuff too. But we claim the Alpha Director thing. We're excited to continue in this, and honored to continue in this chapter of our 10 stories leading up to our 10-year anniversary. And obviously, the Lord's done a lot of things in our life through OKC Community, and so we're excited to share some of our story and some of Ariel's story with you. Let's get going. Let's see, Ariel, in a few minutes, would you give us some background into your life and into your story and kind of what led you here?
Yeah, I just love him. I just love you so much. So I grew up in Norman. And I would say I had a pretty normal childhood. There was some craziness, but every family has craziness. We didn't grow up in the church. We weren't believers. In fact, I would consider myself to be an atheist. Both me and my sister and I hated religion and everything that it stood for. And then I just remember us being alone a lot. My parents worked a lot, so we sat around at the house a lot. And then also, me and my sister's biological dad, he was a drug addict, and he was incarcerated, and it got to the point where he got HIV, and he didn't have a bunch of money, so he ended up passing away from that, and it left a hole in that father figure in our life, and that it does something to your identity. And so I tried to look for my identity in relationships and people. I tried to find my value and worth by doing things like drugs and partying and just trying to get out of my house. And so by the time I was 17, I had been in and out of being arrested in mental institutions and things like that, and I ended up in a place called Teen Challenge. And I hated Christianity, but I surrendered my life to God there, and not because I believed. I did not choose faith because I believed in God. I chose faith because I was broken, and I didn't have any other options. And so I chose God, and the next day I woke up and I was a different person, and I had a peace that I'd never had before. And so I got really close to God when I was there. But when I left, I went back home, and it all fell away from me because I had no one, I had no community, I had no family, I had no one else in my life that believed. And so I lost everything that I knew about God and our relationship. And got into abusive relationships, started doing real drugs, I say real drugs, illegal drugs, and hanging out with people in gangs and violence and things like that, in and out of jail, homeless, moving from place to place. And then I found out I was pregnant, and so I moved into a vacant house in Bethany, Oklahoma, and brought home this baby who you see Goose running around here. That's the baby. And but I took him home to a vacant house with no electricity, no running water, and it was crazy. And I loved him, and I wanted to be more for him, but I was just so deep in my addiction that I couldn't stop, and I couldn't get away from these people, this hole that I was in. And so I cried out to God, please help us, save us. And he answered with the police department coming and kicking in that door and serving up some warrants and losing Goose into DHS custody. And you can show the picture now. So this was the day that I lost my son. This was my lowest point. And so when we sing those songs about death to life, or whenever we sing you're the same God and you're going to do it again, this is the picture that, because it doesn't even feel like me, but this is what I see in my heart, in my mind, and it just breaks me because I will never forget what he did for me and what he would do for anyone that loves him. So I got sober because I wanted this baby back, and I turned my life around. And by the end of that same year, I moved into Hope House, had my own apartment, and I started coming to this church, which sucks at first because you're crying all the time, you don't know anyone, and so I do what I know some of you guys do, where you come late and you leave early to avoid talking to people. And I did the same thing because I was so uncomfortable. Like I said, I didn't grow up in the church, so this was so unfamiliar to me. It didn't feel good to be here. But I dove in and I joined the prayer team because that's the most awkward thing I can imagine doing is praying out loud. Yeah. And I surrendered to worship. I do worship nights. I just dove in, and this church embraced me.
So within part of your story there, you mentioned giving your life to Christ and feeling like there was a transformation, and then coming home away from that the institution you're at there. Can you describe maybe what you feel like that was, that giving your life to Christ, but then falling back into your old addictions, old habits? What do you think the cause of that was?
Acquiring faith is different than being strong in faith, and being supported in your faith. It's like the shallow seed. Unless you have roots, the world will take it away. And so I just felt like I knew God, but I wasn't strong in him. And so without people around me to keep me accountable, to say, hey, no, don't date that person that's 15 years older than you when you're 18 years old, I fell away, like a lot of people do.
And then I hate this part. When you talk about what it was like to bring our little goose to a house with no utilities, as a single mom, can you describe what that was like? And now obviously we have our little Everest is 4 months old, and can you describe the difference between what it was like to bring home Goose as a someone that had no community around you, and then now to be in this place surrounded by all these people, and to have this our little mountain man Everest? Can you describe that?
Well, first of all, I never thought I'd be the kind of person to have kids on purpose. So that is a huge deal for me. It's just like, wow, so stable. So yeah, bringing home Goose, we had nothing, and he knows our story. We talk about it. He's like, remember, Mommy, when your hair was all broken? Because he's seen the picture of me. But we had nothing. We had no food. We had no crib. We had nothing for him. And so it was just emptiness, and desperate and alone. And I felt like, how am I going to do this? But now in this world, I feel like, we had a scare where we thought he might have some health problems. And people were texting me every day saying, I love you, I'm praying for you. I have a husband that I'm looking over and I'm watching him pray over our child as we're having these diagnostics done. And so even in my darkest, weakest times now, it's not like, oh, how am I going to get through this? It's just a peace that I will, and that I have people who love me, and that even if I'm not great, because I'm not, that I can lean on one of my members of my family that are that day.
And then, obviously we've mentioned community quite a few times today. If you were to encourage somebody here today that maybe is in a similar spot in their story as you were, maybe they've never taken that step of faith, and they're kind of on the edge of should I or shouldn't I? And maybe they're new to Christ and new to their whole walk with the Lord. How would you encourage them?
Okay, I have 3 things. I have a 3-point sermon. Just kidding. Alex. Okay. I would say don't underestimate what God has in store for you. I never thought I'd be here. I never thought I'd have a husband that loved Jesus. I never thought my sister would be coming to church. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind can conceive what God has in store for the person that loves him. Which brings me to my next point. Love God. Fall in love with him, because he's either real or he's not. There is no in between. So, and this was for me, if you're afraid to raise your hands in worship, if you're afraid to come to the altar, if you're afraid to accept Christ because someone that you probably don't know is sitting next to you and they're going to know, what are we afraid of? What do we have to lose? And then you belong here, but it is your job to thrive here.
And then if you were, maybe for somebody that's here today that's like, man, I've been a Christian for 25 years, and I can't necessarily relate with things like drug addiction and things like, feeling alone in the world, that kind of thing. How would you encourage them from a standpoint of community regarding your story? Yeah,
just have grace for people. We come in here broken, and so, I know I came in here, I wasn't great. I remember I was on a mission trip with Tim, and we were in Haiti, and we were playing a game, and I was, swearing the whole time. And I'd look at him and be like, oh, I'm sorry, and now we're friends, so it's like, But man, I was so nervous. And so just make people feel welcomed and, bring them into your world and be in community with people who are different than you and that aren't perfect.
Yeah, and we always just say, the most important thing you can do as a community is make sure that everybody knows that they belong, right? It's our job to make sure everyone knows that they belong, and then we pray that the Holy Spirit will move in their heart that they would believe, right? And then in that belief, their behavior would begin to change. So, we love this place, we love community, and we love you guys so much. Would you guys thank my beautiful wife for her story?